Welcome to How Now, the podcast where we talk about how to live in the now. And here's your host, Kim Martin Raymond.
Peace and blessings, love and light, and welcome to this edition of the How Now podcast, where we talk about how to live in the now. I'm your host, Kim Martin Raymond. I'm a minister, spiritual life coach, holistic nutritionist, author, and founder of Redefining You LLC, where I help my clients to realign themselves, mind, body, and spirit. And again, welcome to season 6 of the How Now podcast. So happy to be back from hiatus. Was gone for a little while. Needed some time to regroup and to, take care of some things that were happening in my now. And again, I'm happy to be back and to be before you all again to share what's happening in the now. And if you are new to the How Now podcast and aren't clear on what the How Now podcast is, please be sure to go to my website, www.hownowpodcast.com. Then go and click your favorite podcast platform, and then make sure you like, follow, share, and subscribe. You can go to the bottom of the page and click on the banner for this week's show, and it will take you to the How Now YouTube channel, where you can check out my playlist for any of the episodes that you may have missed over the last 5 seasons. You can check out my playlist for Tuesday, where I share a scripture verse. And you can also learn a little bit more about the 365-day challenge that we just completed at the end of 2025. So again, make sure you like, follow, share, and subscribe, and be sure to smash that notification bell so you always know what's happening in the now. And again, that's www.hownowpodcast.com. All right, so let's get into tonight's show. As I mentioned, we are going to be having a special co-host that will be joining me through 2026. And I'm so happy that he is here. He is going to be talking about living your purpose. And we're going to be talking about the dynamics of that as we go through 2026. So I am excited that he is here. He has been a person who has followed this 365-day challenge every single day. He has walked with me, and I am so grateful for his support and for his expertise and his professionalism. He has been a guest on the show before. And so, as is customary with the How Now podcast, I'm going to have him to introduce himself at this time, and then we'll get right into talking about living your purpose. Welcome back.
Hey, hi, Kim. It's great to see you. Great to be here with this community. Yeah, we've done a program with someone else, and that's how we actually met. I think it was a couple of years ago. So It's exciting. And much respect to you for that 365 and that dedication. It's just amazing, and so impressed that you took care of it. And I'm just glad that I was able to show up and to be there and not even play a part in it, just to be there and witness that amazingness. So it's great. And thank you for having me on your show. I mean, this is amazing. I do shows, but I love to join in like-minded and be here with you today and tonight. Jason Jurado with One Path. My company is transitioning from One Path Coaching to One Path Healing. And, we'll get into that, because that's about living on purpose, and my story that involves about not living my purpose. And that's why I speak to it. And that's why I help clients with that. And won't take a lot of time up with that, but basically I was born a healer. That was my calling from a very young age. I knew it was my calling, although I being born in the early 70s, and it wasn't something we taught about boys and having emotions. That wasn't something. So over this time that we talk, we'll definitely get into the whole story, but I'll just say that, it took me a while to get into living my purpose. And the last 4 years I've been full-time with my company. I've been seeing clients for about 15 years though, but I've been full-time for 4 years, and it's been amazing. And being able to meet people like yourself and talk to these communities and being of service is just my highest calling, and it's in my values. So I'm excited to be here with you, and I want to see where this conversation goes.
Yes. Like I said, I am so excited to have you back, and thank you again for your support and for being here. I've been transparent already in talking a little bit about this 365-day challenge, and people are like, "Oh, would you do it again?" I'm like, absolutely not. When you talk about purpose, there are certain things that we do that are intentional and therefore a season,
Right.
so even though we talked about healthy habits and things like that, this was not something that was habitual, because normally people would not come and be on camera every single day, 365 days a year, unless it was something that they were doing for, as a means of the way they live, or to earn a
Right.
living. So, there are different ways, but, even those who are on every day, they tend to take a break. And so it
Right.
was a lot to do. And so, being able to understand the difference between something that's a habit and that's going to help to increase your wellness versus something that you're doing just for a season and for a time, to open up the the doors of understanding. There's a difference. And so I'm happy to have you here, and I'm happy that you'll be joining me for 2026, and that we're going to be really taking those deeper dives and peeling back the onions on living your purpose. And so let's dive in and talk about some concepts that you have. And I know one of them is the bridge concept, and it's talking about the path to transformation. So let's talk, let's
Yeah.
start there, or start wherever you like.
I would, yeah, I would like to kind of pre-frame it a little bit and kind of talk about how this came about.
Yes.
And the one first thing I want to say is that so my company is One Path. And I've had people approach me. I do different events, and I'm out in the public and things of that nature. And some people, oh, do you mean there's only one path on to get where you want to go? And so I want to clarify that, where that's not it at all.
Right.
To quote Ram Dass, and I don't, we should be fine here. We're not on someone else's. We're on your show.
Right.
Um, Ram Dass, he says we're all just walking each other home, and that's the path. There's a lot of trails to the top of the mountain, but the top of the mountain's the top of the mountain, and we're all going to end up in the same place, regardless of what you believe, where you come from, and I bless you with whatever you believe. That's wonderful. We're all going to the same place, and so that's the one path. We're all walking each other home on that. The other thing I'd like to say is that when I started this process and I really started to talk to clients, when there's marketing, we're in business.
Yes.
We're here to help people and be of service, and it's also a business, and that's a challenge for some folks. And we'll definitely touch on that about values and about how you can look at life and how if you come into this being a healer, being a counselor, whatever, some people, and myself included, have a challenge. We're like, well, I shouldn't charge money for this.
Right.
We'll get to that. We'll definitely get, but so I know what I know. I have my training. I've got my certificates. I've got my master practitioner of this and my master of that, and my, we all do.
Right.
And I try to avoid jargon. Definitely, my teachers and my mentors have been very clear about, they don't know what you know, and it doesn't matter. They just want results, and that's true. And so through this process of having my own business and getting out there, I was talking to somebody that's very close to me, and I was excited, and I was sharing some of my new marketing, and I was talking about living your purpose and finding your way and all this. And she just kind of looked, like dumbstruck, like, and that's part of what I do is I read people. And so I was like, what's going on? And she said, I can't even hear you. Like where I'm at right now, I can't even think about living my purpose and about that. I'm not in that space. I'm not in that place. One of the main things about the work that, helping others is to meet them where they're at.
Yes.
And that sounds cliche and whatever.
Right.
And it can be. Some people are like, oh, they might just say it, but not truly understand the meaning of it. And for me, it's meeting where they're at, where, I respect your model of the world. Wherever you're coming from, that's where we're going to start from. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is about starting from where you're at.
Right.
But it also means about being able to understand that everyone's not where you're at the same time as well. So that was a big thing for me. And I shared this story, and I've talked to this person, and she's fine with it, because it just opened my eyes so much. And, so we talk a lot about that. And the next step was, okay, so how do I help people? How do I get them there? And there's two versions of what we're going to talk about throughout this time. There's two models. There's a model for the path of transformation, and there's a path, the spiritual path of transformation. And I have the same situation and quote, but in different ways for each one. And I'll explain that. So the one quote is about Michelangelo and David. this huge sculpture. If you've been blessed enough to be able to see that, I haven't been there to see it in person.
It's
I
on the
heard it's
bucket.
pretty amazing. And its simplicity too. And, but it's so hard. And they supposedly asked him about how we did it. He had this huge block of marble. And he said, it's simple. I just removed everything that wasn't David.
Mm.
And that's what my work is about.
Wow.
It's not about adding, it's about taking away. It's about taking away all that stuff that's blocking you from living your purpose, about blocking you from being able to see, oh, I do have a purpose. We get caught up in the day to day and we get lost.
Right.
And it's like, hey man, I'm just trying to survive. And trust me, this last year in this United States, we won't get into that, of course, but there's a lot going on. It's all about the external world. Our external world right now is testing us and challenging us. And there's a lot of things around that. So what I did is I stepped back and I said, okay, well, wait a minute. If somebody's not at that point, if they can't even hear, to quote her, if they can't even hear what I'm saying, how do I help them get there? How do I meet them where they're at?
Right.
And at the same time, with helping clients, I don't do the same thing with every client, but I have to have an idea.
Right.
I have to have having structures are very important. I used to say I was in retail leadership for 20 plus years, and I worked in stores, I worked in HR, I worked as a trainer, a lot of different things. But whenever I would train someone, I would always tell them this was rule number one. You have to know the rules before you can break the rules.
Right.
So you have to really understand where you're coming from, before you start tweaking it. And so and I mentioned that because, this is a structure, and we're going to talk about the structure. This is a structure, but this structure allows me then to have fluidity because I'm walking in with these people and I'm like, okay, here's what my plan is. And then things shift. And I say, okay, but I know what this journey is going to look like, but it might look different for them. And then I'm open to that. Okay, well, that might not work. So I just wanted to put that out there. So this is a structure that I use that, someone might say, well, that doesn't work for me.
Right.
And it might not.
Right.
But there's something within there. That's when we get this face-to-face, and that's when we start having these conversations. And we'll talk more about how these tools work.
Yes.
That's when we discover. That's when we go, oh, okay. And for someone that was like, I feel lost, I feel like that, to then say, well, wait a minute, this doesn't work for me. It's like, okay, then what does work? And you've opened a door that wasn't open before. And that's exciting. You can see I'm getting excited because that's exciting. I love it.
I'm just like, oh, because the metaphors that you presented so far are just so vivid for me. I think about that because I know we talked about this before. It's very hard to hear when you're in a tornado and the wind is blowing and someone's trying to talk to you, you're like, how? I can't hear you. I can't see you because so much is swirling around me that, I'm not in a space where I can receive anything because I'm too busy trying to make sure that whatever I'm in right now isn't consuming me. Right. So I love that metaphor of yes, and that understanding that sometimes when things are going on, you can't be heard. But I absolutely love that you talk about the fact that, what it made me think of when you were talking about Michelangelo and talking about David, thinking about people who take that plaster and they stick their hand down in it and you've got something going there. And it's not until you start peeling those things back that you actually see what's in there. And so there's so much that's within, that's hidden. And just like you said, it's a matter of peeling back the onion, peeling back those parts so that you can see the beauty of what's inside there. And so, those are just swirling around in my head. And I'm like, these are just wonderful depictions of what people are experiencing and in a wonderful way to tap into how we can go about getting in there and helping them to get out of that space or helping them to peel back those things that are restricting them so that you get to the core of the beauty that's within. So I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that.
Yeah. And so as I stepped back and I started looking at, okay, so we want to, so I should start with this for those that don't know me. So my main training is in neurolinguistic programming, NLP. And NLP is basically using the language of the mind to get the results that you want. We don't need to get into all that, but it's just that. It's like how we represent our external world internally. That makes our behaviors. And so in that system, we do talk about what I just was talking about, saying that you can't, we use there's different techniques that we use. And one of them is you do an experiment with a person, getting them from like stuck, seeing no way to go to motivation.
Yes.
And you can't take them from stuck, no vision to motivation because it's too far of a leap. And
Mm.
so what we do is we take them, okay, so what would get you off of being stuck? And then you anchor that and elicit that and anchor that. And then you go, okay, from there, what would move you forward? And then take that step. And you do at least 2 intermediate steps. And then you say, okay, then what would take you to motivation? And then we get them to that motivation. So I started using that training as well. And I looked at it, and acronyms are wonderful. It's great to have it, and it's a visual as well. So I've shared this with you. So I started the bridge technique,
Yes.
B.R.I.D.G.E, the bridge technique, and that because that's literally what it is. It's a bridge from where you're at to where you want to be.
Yeah.
And you might not know where you want to be when we start. That's okay. People always ask, well, what's your ideal client and stuff like that. One of the things I say is someone who's ready to change now.
Mm.
And it's not about, oh, well, I know exactly what I want. I just need you to, turn this knob and change this. When someone comes to me and they're like, oh, I got it figured out. I just need you to help me turn this knob and fix this, but as an example, it's
Mm.
like, oh, okay, let's have a conversation. And
Right.
then things start showing up, the unconscious mind gets involved, and then things start coming out. And it's like, oh, okay. And that's what this technique is built to do, is to just to help start where you're at and then go through there.
I love it. I love it. That makes perfect sense, and that's it. It makes me think about I said I love metaphors and I love acronyms and things of that nature as well, because they just help me to make that connection, and it makes me think about redefining you and my business and talking about helping people to align themselves. I think about a GPS system,
Right.
in your car. You don't quite know where you're going, but you want there to be a destination. You don't just get in your car and just drive off. There's some place that you're trying to get to, but then there are new things that are coming up, and pathways that you thought were ones that you knew, and that's the way I need to go, and that's how you do it. And next thing you know, there's a whole complex that's been built, and now you've got to find a way around it. And you're just like, wait, I wasn't ready for that. And so
Right.
sometimes, like you said, until we have that conversation and begin to peel back the layers of that onion, that we realize that, oh, it wasn't, these were the things that were causing me to get stuck, or these were the things that were keeping me from getting, to where I was going, and I couldn't figure it out. And then it makes me think about that cliche statement that they say, what is the definition of insanity? Doing the same
Right.
thing and expecting a different result.
Results.
And so, yeah, I love that you talk about the fact that you have to get to that point of making a change. And I think that involves acknowledging that, that a change needs to be made. There has
Right.
to be something that clicks over that says, hey, what I'm doing right now isn't working. I need to do something, and I'm not quite sure what it is.
Right.
And getting them to
Yeah.
that bridge. Or at least,
Exactly. Yeah. And and we talk about like ideal, and I'm kind of going behind, I'm pulling the curtain back as I say. We, in the because the business of what we do,
yes,
we look at ideal clients and how do we help people. I can't help anyone if I can't talk to them.
right,
That's the bottom line. So, everything I do is to get in front of the right people.
right,
And one of the things is that they say like, well, who needs a therapist, a coach, a counselor, a guide? Well, everyone. It's like I put it back like, well, who needs a mechanic? Funny, this is interesting. We were just talking about this
yes,
offline. Who needs a mechanic? Well, everyone does. And I use
yes,
that as the guide to say, okay, well, everyone needs a mechanic. What do you mean? So whether you just need to get your tune up and you need to get your oil changed if you have a oil combustion engine, if you don't have an EV,
right,
you're going to need a mechanic.
yeah,
If your car's broke down on the side of the road, you need a mechanic.
okay,
And I'm going out of order here, but and if you have a race car, I guarantee you race car drivers have mechanics because they're
right,
getting that extra performance out of their car.
right,
So that's the same way in life. No matter where you're at, you can use the one with some support. That's very important. So that's once again, like we're talking about, meeting people where they're at. So you find out, are you broke down on the side of the road? Are you just, I just need to tune up. I just need to make sure things are going good because life's pretty good. Or
Yes.
no, hey, listen, life's great and I want it to get greater. They say that um, Dan Millman shared this quote with me. He says, the strange thing about life is that you're perfect just as you are and you're going
Mm,
to get better.
yes.
It's
Yes.
like that's
Mm,
true, and
yes.
that's a deeper conversation. But we look at it that way. So when we start, like I think we had talked about before, it's like no one's broken. Let's
Right.
start there. That term really, it's challenging because no one's broken. You're not where you want to be. There's things going on. We all have challenges. Let's start there. Okay, well, are you
Mhm.
where you want to be? No. All right, let's start. And then
Right.
that's the B. That's the B of the acronym
I
is
love that.
be aware of your current situation.
Yes.
And you and I talked about, I think we'll kind of just talk about it in general tonight,
Yeah.
and then we can go in deeper as we go
Absolutely.
along. But the B is, be aware of your current situation. So just recognizing where you're at, and it's very important with honesty and self-compassion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. To me, like you said, it's about acknowledgement. You have to be able to acknowledge it and you know, identify that something is different, something needs to change, something needs to happen. And like you said, being aware of it. Where are you at right now? And then to
Hmm.
go back, for me, everything is about toolboxes. You can have a toolbox. I have a toolbox here in my house, but does that mean that, or I have things in my car? Does that mean that I'm a mechanic and I know how to use them?
Right.
So, it just goes to show that, yeah, those things are within you. You're not broken. You have the tools that you need. It's just that sometimes you need a little assistance with how to use them,
Right.
and then sometimes even we use them, we still need additional support. So that's where, again, I hate for it to be full of cliches, but no man is an island.
Right.
We have to get to a space where we can say, okay, this is something I may have the tools within me, but I don't know how to use them. And that's where you definitely have to be in that space of being able to ask for help. And
Right.
sometimes that's hard to do too, but I like that. Being aware of your current situation, acknowledging where you are, that you can know where you're going. How you going to tell somebody to help you if you're lost somewhere? You say, okay, well, I'm going to come and get you. Where are you? Are you? I don't know. I'm between two trees and there's grass. Well, there's trees and grass everywhere. So I need you to be a
Yeah.
little bit more specific. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So if we're thinking metaphorically, yes, you're standing somewhere. You have to be able to tell somebody, I'm lost. Where I need to know. I need to be able to tell you where I am so that you can get to me.
Right.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
love that.
And one of the challenges in the work that I do is when I ask somebody what they want,
Mm,
well, they flip it almost every time and they tell me what they don't want. And if you were to ask somebody what they don't want, they could most likely come up with pages upon
right,
pages, lists upon lists of what they
right,
don't want in their life.
right,
But if you turn that around and you go, okay, that's great. What do you want?
right,
You get this face. Um, well, I don't want, and I don't want, okay, no, we've done that. We've
right,
exhausted that. I
right,
thought we exhausted that
right,
list, but what do you want? And
right,
that's where we start because that's being aware of your current situation. You can feel that something's off. You can feel that something's not right. You can have a feeling like, you know what, I'm just not where I want to be. That's
right,
very vague. And but that's a great way to start, understanding, things can be better because sometimes we get stuck. Sometimes we get stuck in that's just the way it is. We have these limiting beliefs, and we'll get to those the limiting beliefs of from our past. Well, that's just the way this works. And this, sometimes we have it from our family.
yeah,
The people in my family feel this, the men in my family do that, the women in my family are like this. And that gets very challenging when it comes to disease and livelihoods and things of that
yeah,
nature. You have these old rules that get stuck.
yeah,
And so we say, okay, well, what do you want? Not what do you think someone thinks you should have, not what you should want, not, what do you want, where you want to go. And not to get too in depth, but I do what's called a detailed personal history. It's about
Mhm.
17 questions,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's been formulated to really elicit all the answers. And it's always the first session. I start everyone with that. I say I don't do the same thing with everyone. Well, that we do. And it
Right.
really allows them to get to that point to be aware of their current situation. It really
Mhm.
strips away the problem and we figure it out. So that's key is just, be aware of your current situation.
Right. And I also think that sometimes it's difficult, like you said, because if we're not exposed to things, or we're in an environment where we're limited to resources, sometimes it's hard to tell people what you want because you just haven't been exposed to it, or you're just
Right.
not aware of it, and it's being able to get somebody to that place as well, and it's something to consider because, yeah, I remember when my daughter passed, and I was talking to someone, and they were just like, you know what, you should look into coaching. The only coaching that I knew was, I said, oh, okay. So I said, no, I'm not athletic. I'm not that person. They're like, no, not that kind of coaching. This kind of coach.
Right.
I had no idea. I had never been exposed to what that meant or what that
Right.
entailed. And it wasn't until that came up. And but yes, it came from somebody else, but it gave me exposure to different things so that I could make an informed decision about whether that was something that I wanted to do. So, I think when you're talking about that, being aware of your current situation, and thinking about that question, what is it that you want? You know, is it just based on what you're exposed to, or are there things that you are curious about? And I'm wondering if, that's part of that process as well.
Yeah. And you have to excuse me because I built this system. It's what I do. It's how my brain works. So I've already jumped to the R. I started talking about it
That's
already.
that's all right. That's good.
So the R is remove limiting beliefs and negative emotions from the past that are holding you back. And that's all about letting go of what no longer serves you to create space for new possibilities. And the thing is that, words get put out there, and we talk about what no longer serves you, and it becomes kind of cliche. But cliches are cliches for a reason because
Right,
they're true. They're truisms.
right.
So, what I was already started to talk about, so the R is once we discover where you're at, then we start to look at, and where you want. We start thinking about, okay, well, we want to think about where we're going to go. But once again, if you are held back by all these limiting beliefs and negative emotions from the past, you're not going to be able to see your future.
Mm,
Because limiting beliefs might be telling you, like I explained a little bit before, they might be telling you you can't accomplish this and that you can't do that, and you are only here's I'm going to share this, and it's kind of harsh. It's usually I usually don't share it in open forums, but I'll share it because of the conversation we're having.
yes.
My mentor, he would tell us, you know how much money did you make last year? 50,000, 60,000, 100,000, whatever that number is. He said, whatever that number is, that's what you believe you're worth.
Mm,
And when it comes to making money, if somebody comes to me to see about, and I don't work too much in business, but if I do work with someone and that's connected, because I have a client right now that owns their own business,
mhm,
well, I'll leave it at that. And they're having some challenges. And so we looked at their values, and their values career was very low in their values, but we talked about, money when it comes to their career and what do you believe you deserve and earn. And
mm,
so that's a limiting belief. We tell ourselves, well, I could never make X. I can never make that. And it
right,
has to be realistic. We'll get into the SMART goals. It has to be realistic. You can't be like, well, I'm going to make $1 million because Jason said, if I believe it, I can do it.
right, right,
You could, but not necessarily maybe doing the same thing you're doing. If you're working at an entry level job, you're not going to make $1 million in that. So and your unconscious mind knows that. Your unconscious mind, like, come on, dude, come on,
right.
no, that's not going to happen. But beyond that, the bigger scope, they're limiting beliefs that we have. I don't deserve to be happy.
Mm,
It's a sad truth that I probably have had 50% of my clients that has come up at some point in time.
yeah,
I'll see it, and I'll be like, I'll just ask them, building rapport, being that relationship already built, and I'll say, do you think you deserve to be happy? And it usually hits them like a ton of bricks, because they'll like, no. And it's sad,
Yeah.
but it's the truth, because that's holding them back for whatever reason, for whatever it is. So that's the R. And like I said, we talked about not getting too in depth. We want to try to get through the list tonight, and then we'll move forward. But that's it. Removing limiting beliefs and negative emotions.
Yeah.
Really quick, removing negative emotions from the past. If you don't think that affects you, and emotions are not bad, emotions are signals. Emotions are telling you something to look at, right?
Right.
So you don't push them away, don't put them down. But when they're inappropriate and unwarranted,
Right.
then you have to look at, where's this coming from. I
Right.
use the example of road rage. Usually, I've lived in San Francisco Bay Area in California. I've lived in LA in California, near like the busiest freeway in the
Right.
United States, the
Yes.
405, 101. It's crazy. But when you ask people, yeah, I get upset and blah 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 in road, it's like, well, what happened? And most likely it wasn't like life or death. There's times, of
Right.
course, but
Right.
it's just like somebody didn't signal, someone didn't let you in, and you just have this reaction.
Right.
And it's not about that incident. It's something from your past. You can't do that to me. I'm worth it. You can't tell me that I'm not worth, I have a
Right.
place. There's a lot of things attached to that
Mm.
emotion. So we have a process. I have a process called timeline therapy that we help get rid of that. But
Yeah.
that's the thing, you've got this stuff from your past that's setting your rules, and that's holding you back from moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. And it's there's so, like I said, there's so much that's involved in the why we do things. I talk about the importance of responding as opposed to reacting to the things that are happening around us. And that's something that's huge, because we react out of a limiting belief, or out of or out of our being unaware, or out of fear, things of that nature. We respond when there's wisdom, when there's knowledge, a knowledge base that's going to help us to make a better choice, or a better decision about how we were responding to that, as opposed to having that
Exactly.
knee-jerk reaction and just reacting out of anger, out of frustration. So there's so much there, when we're talking about how we can, again, build that toolbox that's going to help us, because we know that situation is coming, or that is
Right.
going to come again. And how are we going to be prepared for it? So I love that we're
Right.
going through this, through each one of these acronyms, because it's important for us to develop and establish those things, if we're going to get to that place of responding as opposed to reacting to situations that are going to come up more than one time in our lives. Yeah.
Exactly. And then we move into the I,
Uh-huh.
and that's about identifying your core values and your mission, gaining
Mhm.
clarity on what truly matters. So values are what's important to you.
Yes.
And then we look at values in different ways, and it's like, in the context of life, what's important to you, and that's one set of values. And then within those, so if someone comes to me for career, spirituality, relationships, family, there's 6 main ones we look at. And it's like, okay, what area is really challenging you? And then let's look at, within that context, what's not what you want it to be, but currently what's important to you about this. And that's where you look at values.
I love that.
That starts to open up, what's your mission. We're kind of getting clear on where you're currently at. And then you start removing the roadblocks to letting you see clearly of what you do actually want, instead of what you don't want. Because remember, what you focus on is what you get. That's a
Right.
conversation for another day, but we know
Right.
that. What
Yes.
you focus on is what you get. And there's scientific things about that, and there's spiritual things about that, there's quantum things about that. And I'm excited, because I'm looking forward to all of our conversations we're going to have. But we'll
Yes.
start with that. So the I is about identifying your core values. So what's important to you? And then
Right.
once you start looking at that, you say, oh, most of us have to work, right?
Yes.
And there's times when you might take a job that's not fulfilling, and it's not your calling. It's not, and that happens, and that's okay.
Yes.
But as you start to develop and grow and say, well, what do I want? Because we fall into things in our lives. We just
Yes.
happen to stumble. We have more control than we think, but for this conversation, we'll just say we kind of stumble into some things, and you start working somewhere, and you just kind of, it's good
Right.
enough. And unfortunately, that happens in our lives. We feel that our life is good enough, you
Right.
know, and you
Right.
just keep rolling with it. And it's like, we're here for a very short time. Why not enjoy it fully? And I hear people out there screaming, Jason, what if it was so easy? I would just do it. It's not that. Let's start and go through the process. Let's
Right.
clean it up. Let's look at that. Figuring out what's important to you, not what you should be important to you, not what not what someone told you. There's a lot of people that even at high level careers that, oh well, my parents were lawyers, doctors, CPAs, whatever, and that's how I got into the field. Or
Right.
my family, did this type of work, construction or whatever,
They own a
mechanics.
business and they want you to continue the legacy.
Exactly. And that's, but if it's not working, it's not working.
Right.
And so that's the I, and we can get into that later, but that's it. Identifying your core values and your mission. So that's very important too.
Yes. Yes.
And then for the sake of time, we're going to get into, then we go to D. This is the fun part. This is the exciting part to me.
Okay.
Designing a clear vision and strategy. That's
Yes.
the D. That's that designing your life. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
We think that we're at, well, let me pause here for a second. The biggest thing that I start with clients on is this one simple fact. Who's driving the bus? Because you're either at cause of your life or you're at the effect of something else. And that's a deeper conversation, and it can get tricky, because when you start talking about being at cause for your life, when you start talking about trauma and negative things, it's not blaming you for what happened. It's just looking at what role you played in that. And bad things happen. And I work with a lot of people that have dealt with trauma. And so I say this with all loving and from my heart, with compassion. But once we realize, moving forward, because it's not so reflective, but moving forward, are you at the effect? Do you feel that you're the effect of the world? Well, this happened to me, and that happened, and this happens, and I've got to pay this bill, and I've got to that, and this is me getting blown in the wind, right? That's what
Right.
happens. We get blown in the wind, and we're like, oh. Or are you at cause? And you're like, you know what? I'm not where I want to be, but I'm going to make some decisions. And that's where you start. That's where your life begins, when you design a clear vision and a strategy, and you start there and you start mapping out your path with practical steps. I'd mentioned before, it's like, don't say I want to make $1 million working at an entry-level job.
Right.
That's not a practical step. Well, okay, so maybe I need to get some education. Maybe I need to get some schooling, some training, whatever that looks like, some on-the-job training, whatever, to start moving. My background, I come from, my grandfather on my mom's side owned his own garage. He was first generation born in the United States, Portuguese. His parents, my great grandparents, were, greenhorns. They came over from the Azores when they were in their 20s, and then they were dairy farmers, and my grandpa worked dairy farm, and then he started in 1947, started his garage, and went there. My dad grew up on a ranch. He was born in 1938 down in LA when it was all orange orchards, and my grandfather ran the cattle. He was a cattleman, and my dad ended up working with thoroughbreds. So it doesn't, I'm not saying you have to go to college. College is for a lot of people. Formal education is for a lot of people. I've had a lot of formal education outside of the college, but figuring out, that's part of that mapping out process. Finding out what works for you. Your community probably knows your story about how you've switched different times, and you keep growing and you keep gaining knowledge, and how else can I help myself, my family, and other people, and being of service, which is amazing. I love all that you're doing, and what I've seen so far. It's amazing. But that's what we do. And we start designing it, and then we design a plan to achieve it. Okay, what's it going to work? How's this going to happen? How's that going to get me to where I want to go?
But I like that you use that metaphor of that, who's driving the bus. And it's just like, okay, are you a passenger, and how do we get you in the driver's seat? And what does that look like, and what does that feel like? To be in that space. Especially if you've been a passenger for so long, it's like, okay, I know how to drive, but I've never been given an opportunity to drive. So how do I get behind that seat and not wreck the bus? And then who's going along for the ride?
Mhm.
Especially if you've been the person that's been the passenger. You're like, okay, well then who is driving, and how do you move that person from that seat and place yourself in the driver's seat of your own life? There are just so many, like I can't stop saying it. There are so many layers to it, and hard questions that you have to answer. And that puts me into mind. I had been working on my trust, and building legacy and things like that. And I think about that. The questions that they asked were questions that I would have never, I never
Right.
really sat down and thought about. And so, when you're prompted to answer these questions, yes, sometimes you're in a bit of a quandary, because you're like, I never thought of that. I never considered that. And no, I don't know how to do that. So there's a lot that comes along with it. And I can see where, some people would have pause. You're asking
Mhm.
me to design my life. You're asking me to be able to have a clear vision. How do I do that? And so I love that we're going to be having these conversations, because they're sometimes the questions, they appear easy, but they're a little bit more difficult
Right.
to answer than you anticipate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you were mentioning about it's fear. It's, having to drive the bus is scary. And having to step into that role is scary. And it's
Mhm.
like it's easier sometimes just to sit in the back. And you know
It's
what?
not
Well, I'll get somewhere. I'm going and whatever. But to your point, it's like, well, I know how to drive.
right.
But then you get in that seat and you're like, wait a
It's
minute. And then you start though. But that's what we're talking about is
right.
then you start, you just put it in gear.
Right.
Let your foot off the brake, man, and
Right.
let's see what happens, and let's start figuring it out. When you realize that, wait a minute, I'm responsible. Double-edged sword,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's like, wait a minute now. Now I am at
Right.
cause for my life. If something goes wrong, it's on me. And
That's it.
there is something comforting about knowing that you can blame others. And I hate to
The
say
life
it
of
like
an
that, but that's
entrepreneur.
true.
Right. The life of an
Right.
entrepreneur. You go from working for somebody to working for yourself, and it's just like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I didn't sign up for all this. Yes, you did.
Hmm. Exactly. Yes, you didn't realize it, but yes, you
Right.
did. And then I wanted to comment on something else you said, and it's a quote. So Tony Robbins is an interesting character.
Yes.
Tony's trained in NLP. He actually worked with one of the founding people. NLP's only been around 50 years now. We just celebrated the 50-year anniversary. There's two main people, and Tony worked with him. Tony's an interesting fellow. He is who he is. He's very smart. He's very good at what he does. He doesn't. I'm not a fan. I don't dislike Tony, but I'm not a fan. I just
Right.
want to say that
Right.
because he's
Right.
a well-known character. But he's very smart. But
Mhm.
the way he achieves his things, sometimes I see what he's doing, but I'm like, I probably wouldn't do that, Tony. I
Right.
probably wouldn't be there. But
Right.
he shares a quote and he says, the quality of your life equals the quality of questions you ask yourself.
Mm.
And that's what you were talking about, is that you might not ask yourself these questions. So the quality of your life equates to the quality of the questions that you're asking yourself. So
Mm.
if you're not really investigating what's going on, if you're not really open to, let's look at why I'm at where I'm at, and you figure it out. So that's the next step. And then we move into G, and this is generating momentum and confidence. So building on small successes to create lasting change. When I work with clients, one of the main things that I have to really instill in them is to celebrate the so-called small wins.
Yes.
So they've discovered where they're at. They cleared out what was holding them back. They saw what was important to them, gave them an idea of what they wanted. Then they designed that vision and strategy, working together, and now they're taking action. and you take action, well, it doesn't always work out. You know, one of the things I see that I disagree with is that we had a big boom about the last 5 to 10 years where people start talking about failure.
Mm,
Failure's not bad, and it's okay to fail. And they tried 10,000 things before they made the light bulb and all. And I agree with that, but sometimes people are given Cliff's notes and might not really understand what they're saying. And it's like it's not about throwing, as we used to say, throwing the pasta against the wall to see if it sticks.
yes,
You used to
yes,
test, to see if it's ready.
yes.
It's not about that. It's not like let's just try whatever and see. It's taking those calculated risks to figure out what can work. Because
Right.
then you can go back and say, oh, that didn't work. Well, why didn't it work? Well, now let's try something else. But if you're
Mm,
just like, let's just try whatever, just keep going, you're not doing yourself any service.
right.
You're really disrupting these patterns that we're trying to build.
Right.
And so, yeah, if you fail, acknowledge, what? I tried that and it didn't work. Okay, well, what about it didn't work? Let's dissect it.
Right. Right.
But when you do take a step and you do move forward, celebrate. You know
Yes.
what? I found my clients will say to me, yeah, I found myself, I would have reacted a certain way before, and it's just not there anymore.
Right.
I'm in this. It doesn't bother me. I'm happy. I don't allow this thing to interfere with the way I'm living. I don't allow these people to make me change who I am. You
Right.
know, I
Right.
know I'm working on me, whatever. And I'm like, well, let's celebrate. Have you celebrated yet? I usually start when some clients, when we get into that point, what I'll usually do is I'll start with each session, we check in and I say, okay, tell me one way that you acted in the old way. Something that came up this,
Mhm.
I usually see clients about every week.
Mhm.
Since the last time we met, what's one circumstance that showed up that you acted in the way of your old self, of the
Right.
old way of being? They'll tell me, oh, and this came up and this came up, or they can't, and that's even better. And then I'll
Right.
say, okay, tell me 2 ways, and they know I'm going to ask this, so they know it's accountability.
Yes.
2 ways that you acted in the new way that you want to live the life that you want.
Yeah.
Oh, well, this didn't happen. I did this and I did that, and that's great. Let's celebrate. That's awesome.
Great.
You
Yep.
know, and they're
Right.
not used to that. They're not used to it because what do? We're firefighters. We're always looking for what's wrong.
Right. Right.
Negativity bias, if you want to put a
Right.
label on it. We're
Right.
always looking for what's wrong. Let's start looking for what's right.
Right.
And so when you do that, man, that becomes that talk about generating momentum and confidence. I can do this. You know what? I am doing this, right?
Yes.
That's the step, man. You turn that
Yes.
corner, things start showing up and you start focusing on that good stuff and good
Right.
stuff keeps showing up.
Just like you said, that it makes me think of gratitude journals and
Yeah.
writing down those things that it's those small things that we forget about. We
Yeah.
talk about, I have to get up to go to work. Oh my goodness. Did you get up out of a bed? Were you looking at the
Right.
stars or were you looking at the ceiling? Were
Yeah.
you comfortable? Did you have running water? Were you able to get in your vehicle and go to that job? There were so many little steps to get to that point. When we just sit there, we think, oh my God, I just have to get up and I just hate it. I have to do that. We don't focus on all of those other wonderful things that allow us to do the things that we're doing. And like you said, it's about celebrating those small wins. That's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
All right.
And then the last step, and this is where it really this is the transformation. This
Yes.
is really where we get to, all right, let's start checking in. So the E stands for embracing your purpose and potential,
Yes.
fully stepping into your authentic, empowered life, you know? And this is the part where it's generative change. That's what we look for. Change that you don't need Jason every day. You
Right.
don't need me talking you through these things. You don't need, because the work that we've done now has instilled in you and installed in you these tools. Talk about toolbox. You
Yeah.
have that toolbox and you know how to use these tools. And
Yeah.
we do come back and we do check in and we do,
Right.
hey, well, let's tweak it. Overcoming challenges as you work towards your goal. That's the key. You know, you see doors where you used to see walls or fences, and you're like,
Yes.
okay, let's figure it out. To go from hey, live your purpose and, live your dream, and saying, I can't even hear that. I can't even hear that.
Right.
To now you're like, I'm doing this. I'm moving forward. I
Yeah.
know where I'm going. I know what I want to achieve. When stuff comes up, I got this. I
Right.
have the confidence now because I can see clearly and I'm moving forward. And
Yes.
that's the original bridge, the path to transformation. There's another version for spirituality, which we'll get into, but that right there, that's the bridge acronym that I wanted to share tonight.
Absolutely. I am so excited for this year and for how we're going to tap into these to each one of these acronyms as we go along our path here in living out your purpose, because there are so many things that are going to be added to your personal toolboxes on a mental, spiritual, and physical level that are going to help people to, again, to take that bridge to that better version of themselves, or to where it is that there's a freedom that comes with being able to embrace your purpose and your potential, and being able to get people to that space. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about how we're going to continue to help people to unpack this, so to speak. And so I thank you for, at least opening that door, or at least bringing that scratching that surface so that people's interests are now peaked. And it's like, okay, Jason, how are we going to do that? So I'm
Right.
excited about what
Yeah.
is to come and what we've learned tonight. So be sure to have your pencils and your paper ready. Take notes. Make sure you go back and watch the episode again, so that way you're gleaning all of the information that you need, and that you'll have that toolbox established as we get as we go through the months ahead. Okay. So one thing that I definitely want to say before we go is make sure that you are tapping into my podcast, to my
Yes.
website, that you can contact Jason. He's got it. It's been scrolling across the bottom of the screen during the show, that you can contact him through onepathhealing@gmail.com if you have any questions so far. But like I said, he's going to be joining me through 2026. And each month we're going to be unpacking another aspect of living your purpose. But before we wrap things up, are there any things that you want to share, any final or parting words this week, or something that they can focus on before we meet again?
Know that you're amazing. Know that, we came from something amazing, and it's not a source of lack. It is a source of all things and all abundance. And there's times when you can't see it. There's times when, and I have those moments myself. I'm not sitting here to say I got it all figured out, because I use these tools all the time myself. I'm a mindfulness and meditation teacher as well. And trust me, there's times when I am not fully present. I am not here now, but know that you are amazing. Know that this abundance is within you,
Yeah.
and your purpose, you might not see it, but it's there. And there's a calling, and there's something that, and purpose doesn't have to be a huge deal. It could be just something that you focus on. So just know that you're starting from a place that you are amazing, and that you might not see it right now, but as we talk about these tools, that helps you going to just pull those blinds back, and you'll be amazed.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Well, Jason, I want to thank you for being here this evening, and for helping to kick off this new year and this new path of living your purpose. I'm looking forward to all that we're going to share with our listeners, and hoping that they'll come out of it, like you said, to be the masterpiece that they are. Okay,
Exactly.
so thanks again for joining me for this episode of the How Now podcast, and we look forward again to tapping in. Be sure to reach out to Jason if you have any additional questions as we're moving forward, and that'll do it for tonight's show. So again, make sure that you reach out to us, contact us. Make sure that you click that notification bell, like, follow, share, subscribe, so that way you know what's happening in the now.
Yeah.
And until we see you all the next time, I say peace.
Bye.